I walked into the house after a long workday with a heavy feeling of foreboding, as if something was not right. I could not pinpoint the exact cause, but I understood that sooner or later this was bound to happen. It was 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, yet the atmosphere felt strange. Usually at this time, I am in the workshop preparing for the Saturday rush of customers. My name is Mark Ashworth, and I run the company Ashworth Autos. My business has been thriving since I started repairing cars at 16. At 20, I opened my own shop, specializing in servicing expensive European automobiles. There were plenty of such cars in the area, but the only local mechanic charged exorbitant fees. It was a risky venture, but I had a clear business plan, and the bank manager supported me. Additionally, my grandfather helped with the initial capital. Wealthy people who owned luxury foreign cars became my regular customers. Over time, they began asking me to find vehicles for their children when they turned 16. So I expanded my operations, getting into used car sales and bodywork repairs. Now I am 38. I have 4 branches, and the business is easily worth $8 million. Things are going very well. Today I came home early because my wife, Hannah, insisted on having a serious conversation. She is 35, and we have been married for 14 years. Our acquaintance happened when her father, John, asked me to find a car for her 20th birthday. We hit it off immediately, and we got married a year later. We have 2 sons, 12-year-old James and 10-year-old Martin. Hannah's father, John, is a great man. He works as an accountant, is a partner in his firm, and has always supported me in business matters. Her mother, Stephanie, on the other hand, does not like me. She calls me a fat ape and is convinced Hannah could have found a better match. There is also Hannah's brother, Alex, who rejects the institution of marriage, and her younger sister, Susan. She is married to Barclay, a lawyer. He is an extremely self-absorbed type, though in reality he is just a run-of-the-mill attorney. But Stephanie is absolutely delighted with him. Something happened to Susan in her youth, something the family does not talk about. But after an operation she had, she cannot have children. Our boys are the only grandchildren in the family. Stephanie is not happy about this at all, and Susan is in despair because of her mother's constant reproaches about continuing the family line. Hannah worries a lot about her sister. Once I suggested the idea of adoption, but Stephanie flew into a rage, declaring that she only wanted blood-related grandchildren. John suggested considering surrogacy, and Susan was interested. I explained the principles of IVF to them, but Stephanie was skeptical and started pressing for details about who would be the egg donor. That discussion started 3 months ago, and since then the topic has come up every 2 weeks. Returning to my feeling of foreboding, for the past week, Hannah had been acting distant. I could not understand why, but I noticed she was constantly texting someone. Usually she does not hide her phone, but now she started concealing it. We hadn't been intimate for over a week, and the rare moments that did happen lacked their former spark. Something was clearly wrong. Our house is located on a 1.5-hectare plot of land that my grandfather gave me when I was 11. I built this house right after we got married. This land used to be part of a 6-hectare estate where my grandfather practiced horticulture. 1/2 hectare in the old building he bequeathed to my older brother, and the remaining 4 hectares he sold for development, creating a trust fund for the family's needs, including our children's education. The mansion is not visible from the road, so when I pulled up and saw many cars at the entrance, my intuition immediately kicked in. John and Stephanie's cars, Susan and Barclay's, and several other unfamiliar vehicles. It became obvious that something was being planned, even though everyone was trying to act as if nothing special was happening. I parked and went inside, mentally preparing for any turn of events. I decided to enter through the garage, knowing no one would hear me that way. Standing in the utility room, I listened, but only muffled voices reached me. I always carry a voice recorder in my pocket, a habit John taught me for documenting work meetings. I turned the device on and put it back, understanding that it would record everything that was about to happen. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped into the kitchen. In the corner, 8 people were gathered. Hannah, John, and Stephanie sat on a 3-seater sofa. Susan and Barclay occupied a 2-seater. Alex sat in a separate armchair, and Aunt Joan and Aunt Karen sat on chairs brought in from the dining room. The only empty spot, a chair from my office, had been placed so as to create distance between me and the others. I immediately realized this was some kind of trap. When I closed the door behind me, Hannah looked up and said, "Come in, Mark. Have a seat. We're discussing something and we want your opinion." I thought to myself, of course, they have something planned and expect me to just go along with it. Instead of the offered seat, I took one of the bar stools and turned it to face everyone present. I wanted to change the atmosphere in the room. By being higher than the rest, I not only increased the distance, but also forced them to look up at me. I remained silent, staring intently into Hannah's eyes, showing just how angry I was. She blushed, realizing my maneuver, but could not hold my gaze. I slowly scanned the room. John and Alex avoided looking at me. Stephanie had a smug look, as if she was in control of the situation. Barclay was smirking, and Susan was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a very long time. The air in the room became heavy, the tension rising like a ticking bomb. I did not rush to speak first, not wanting to make it easier for them. I let the silence drag on, watching Hannah squirm under its weight. Her gaze darted around. She knew I would not let her off the hook. I didn't even blink, continuing to watch her fidget, trying to escape reality. It was clear she was already on the verge of a breakdown. Stephanie broke the silence. With a smug smirk, she declared, "Mark, we have decided everything. We have a plan to fix Susan's situation." She spoke as if everything was fine, and I wasn't about to expose this farce. I didn't even look her way. My gaze was locked on Hannah, who was acting like a coward. Finally, she had no choice left. She lifted her head, and her voice trembled. "Mark, you know Susan can't have children, and we discussed surrogacy. It's a good solution. Mom wants the genes to be family ones, so we decided that I will be the surrogate mother." I could no longer hold back. "So you've been discussing this for weeks, and I'm just supposed to accept it? You think this doesn't involve me or our children?" My voice came out sharply, like a whip crack. "Are you kidding me? You had these conversations and didn't think to inform me? That's not how things are done in our family. Hannah, you have no right to make decisions about our life without my involvement." Stephanie interjected. "What do you mean? This is being done for the family, Mark. All you need to do is be a good husband, support her, and smile for the camera." I slowly and deliberately turned toward her, not taking my eyes off Hannah. "No, Stephanie, this is my problem. It will affect me and the boys. Do you think they won't notice anything? Do you think they won't be confused when their mother is gone? They will feel abandoned while their mother lies in a clinic, jabbed with needles and pumped full of hormones. It will break them, and it will break me too." I leaned forward and said in a quiet, venomous tone, "You have no idea what devastating consequences this will lead to. But believe me, it's real. You can't just ignore this." I didn't even look at the others. I only briefly noticed Barclay's stupid grin and how Susan squirmed uncomfortably. I sensed a trap in my gut. "What the hell is going on here?" I whispered. And then Stephanie dropped the mask. "There will be no IVF," she said with a smile, as if telling a fairy tale. "My grandchild will be conceived in love, not in a test tube." In that moment, I understood everything. This was not a medical decision, but a trap, and I was the last to know. I felt my blood boil, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Are you insane?" I roared. "You think you'll pull this off and I won't notice? Do you take me for an idiot?" I turned to Hannah with fury in my eyes. "Explain yourself, now!" She flinched, genuine fear in her eyes. She had not been prepared for such resistance. Control of the situation was lost. "2 months ago I stopped taking birth control," she whispered, barely audible. 3 weeks ago I had my period, and it will come again soon. In a couple of weeks, the right time for conception will come, and Barclay will move in with me. We will conceive a child, and then Susan and Barclay will adopt it. That way, it will be their biological child." By this point, I was standing right in front of her, clenching my fists. Rage spread through my body like a wildfire. But before I could say anything, Alex put his hand on my shoulder, trying to hold me back. I tried to shake his hand off, but he did not let go. "Mark, calm down. Please, don't do anything stupid," he begged in a quiet, even voice. I shook off his hand, giving him a cold look. "Stupid? You think what I'm about to do is stupid? You have no idea what's about to happen." I didn't even grace him with a glance. "Get out of here. Now." I turned to the others. Stephanie tried to object. "No, Mark, we need to settle this." But I cut her off. I had had enough of lies and manipulation. You don't get to decide anything here. I do, and right now, I am ordering you all to get out of my house." John had already jumped to his feet, trying to get his wife up. I snapped, "John, if your wife does not leave this house in 10 seconds, I swear to God, I will throw her out myself. And consider that my promise." Stephanie's eyes widened, and she seemed frozen. The woman realized I was no longer joking. She threw a desperate look at Hannah, hoping for some final support, but it was over. In a trembling voice, she asked if Hannah needed her to stay for protection. I only gave a bitter, harsh laugh. Protection? Did she seriously think I would harm my own wife? My voice became quieter, cutting through the air like a blade. I declared that if they were counting on a favorable outcome for my marriage, or thought I would accept their actions, then they did not know me at all. Pale Hannah, her eyes wide with fear, looked at me, then at her mother and the others present. She asked everyone to leave, saying that she and Mark needed to talk privately. When the room finally emptied, I headed straight to my office and locked the door behind me. First, I downloaded the recording of the argument that had just happened and reset the device. At that moment, Hannah started shouting outside the door, accusing me of unprecedented rudeness and demanding that I come out and act like an adult. Incredible. She had unleashed this chaos on me herself, and now she was indignant at my rage. I said nothing, merely smirking to myself. At work, I have a system set up that records all phone calls, text messages, and chats. It is part of our customer relationship management system, which has saved us many times, especially regarding billing for extra services. Hannah's phone was no exception. It constantly buzzed with notifications, and everything was saved in the archives, though most data usually went into a junk folder. I immediately started going through her records, looking at calls and messages between her mother Stephanie, Susan, and Barclay. Everything became perfectly clear. They had created a group called Baby. In that chat were Hannah, Susan, Barclay, and Stephanie. I carefully studied the correspondence, taking my time. It all started about 3 months ago, right after we first talked about surrogacy. At first, Hannah offered to be an egg donor, but soon the situation escalated. She volunteered to carry the child herself. Stephanie actively directed the conception process, and Barclay eagerly chimed in with his comments. The strangest thing was Stephanie's demand. She insisted on natural conception, because she believed that children created in a test tube lack emotional maturity. It took me about an hour to gather my thoughts. During that time, I also contacted my lawyer, asking him to recommend a divorce attorney. Coming out of my office, I found Hannah in the corner. She was sipping wine as if she had all the time in the world. My first flash of anger had subsided, but her eyes still burned with fire. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms, and threw out a question like a dart. Did she really think I would just swallow this sudden madness? Her face contorted with a fresh wave of rage. She claimed we had agreed to help her sister and called my behavior the tantrum of a spoiled child. She was outraged that I was kicking her family out of the house, as if it belonged only to me. I just laughed bitterly. I asked if she seriously intended to cover up adultery with a pretty story about helping her sister. I said outright that she had lost her mind, and added that this was my house too. If she continued to show disrespect, it would lead to divorce. I asked where the children were, hoping she hadn't dragged them into this mess. The mention of a breakup stung her, but she quickly recovered. Hannah declared that in a divorce, I would be left with nothing. I would have to pay child support and spousal support, and she would take half of the business I had worked so hard to build. She even threatened to sell her share to the highest bidder. I laughed again. She was remarkably naive. I asked if she really thought Barclay's advice would save her. I explained that his recommendations were worthless. I would not only get his license revoked, but I would also remind her that this house and land belonged to me before the marriage. We signed a prenuptial agreement, under which she has no claim to them, just as I have no claim to her and her father's business. I said that if she wanted to get pregnant by another man and use that as leverage, then go ahead. But I reminded her of her medical records. During both her previous pregnancies, she nearly died due to blood pressure problems. If she continued this madness, I was prepared to fight for sole custody. My condition was harsh: no conception by Barclay while she is married to me. I refused to even discuss IVF because I no longer trusted her. She found herself in a situation where she would either win or lose everything. Hannah tensed noticeably, trying to regain control. After a moment's hesitation, she asked where the children were. That word eased the atmosphere a little, but did not change the reality. It turned out the boys were at the Pattersons' house, number 30. She left to get them, asking me to make dinner. I said nothing, just nodded. I took a couple of pizzas out of the fridge and heated them up. The whole evening I spent in the garden, playing soccer with the boys and pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was seething. The children went to bed at 9:30 in the evening, tired from playing. I could not hold back any longer. Taking a beer, I sat down across from Hannah, who was still sitting with her glass of wine. I asked if she really expected me to let her sleep with another man, to have a child for her sister, and act as if nothing had happened. I emphasized that she had no idea what humiliation she was trying to subject me to, demanding that I vacate my own bed. Her face fell for a moment, but she quickly changed tactics, starting to play the victim. She kept saying she was doing this for Susan, who was on the verge of a breakdown. According to her, their mother forbade them from doing IVF, and Barclay did not have the money for it. She declared that she would never forgive herself if something happened to her sister. I shook my head, answering that this was plain blackmail and an attempt to make me feel guilty. I offered to pay half the cost of the procedure, along with her parents, if it was so necessary. But I made it very clear, I had already contacted a lawyer. If she went through with this, our marriage was over. She would destroy everything we had built. Hannah ran off to the bedroom in tears and slammed the door loudly. I had no intention of sleeping next to her. The thought that she might try to appease me at night disgusted me. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be without me. Locked in my office, I checked her messages again. Susan was panicking in the chat, calling this her last chance. Hannah promised to work on changing my mind, and her mother advised her to just do what she had planned and ask for forgiveness later. Barclay wrote that he could not afford a divorce, to which Hannah replied that her business was not part of our prenuptial agreement. Then I saw a message from Hannah saying that I was looking for a lawyer. My corporate attorney, Tony, had responded to the email, expressing his regrets and recommended Liam Strong. Soon an email came from Liam himself, asking for information. I knew the time had come. I created a new document, detailing everything I had learned over the past 3 months. I attached screenshots from the group chat and a copy of the document Hannah had signed years ago, allowing the company to collect and use her messages. Closing my laptop, I made up the sofa and fell asleep. I was woken by the sound of the doorknob rattling and desperate knocking. It was Hannah. She shouted in a panic, asking why I hadn't come to bed. I glanced at the clock. It was 3:30 in the morning. Barely containing my irritation, I unlocked the door. She stood in the hallway in a robe that was barely tied. I looked at her in silence, as if she were a stranger. In response to my cold question about what the problem was, she tried to act casual, but I could see how tense her shoulders were. I was waiting for you in bed. It was 22 hours. I was hoping we could at least talk and calm down. You tried to convince me that my jealousy was unfounded. Of course, I didn't believe a single word. I didn't let on that I knew about the group chat. I saw no point in telling you that I had access to your lies. So I remained reserved, looking at you without a trace of tenderness. Hannah, for many years you have used your methods to get what you wanted in small things. Which color car to choose, or whether to get a dog. But this is not about buying a car or a pet. We are talking about betrayal. You are planning to cheat on me, and no feigned sympathy or pseudo-scientific arguments about helping your sister will change that. Her gaze flickered for a moment, as if she hadn't expected such sharp resistance. I added in a quiet but firm and dangerous voice that I was not going to share a bed with someone who was thinking about being intimate with another man. If you want that, fine. But don't even think that it won't destroy everything. You have already made it clear what your priority is. I stood and looked down at her. I don't need a person who disrespects me so much that she doesn't even try to hide her scheming behind my back. I gave her time to absorb what she had heard, but I wasn't finished. This is not about jealousy, Hannah, and not about my insecurity. The problem is that you are trampling on my feelings and my self-respect. Your plans have already destroyed everything. The main question is whether I can look at myself in the mirror every morning, knowing that I live with a woman capable of lying to my face like that. I locked the door, turned off the light, and remained standing in the silence. A sliver of light came from under the door, meaning Hannah was still there. A heavy sigh came, and the light went out. Saturday arrived. Usually I leave later, but today I left the house early. I grabbed a bite on the way and went to the office to plan everything in peace. I knew that Hannah would try to change tactics. Last night, she used her usual method of seduction, hoping for my submission. In the past, I always gave in, but now it felt good to be firm. I wondered if she realized that this time it wasn't about some dog. She had two choices: pretend to be the perfect wife and mother, hoping I wouldn't notice the infidelity, or start making my life miserable if I didn't give in. I was betting on the first option. I stayed at the office until 4:30 in the afternoon, after everyone else had left. I just didn't feel like going home. Our marriage was like a cracked mirror. Hannah had thrown a brick into it, and it would remain broken forever. I came to the conclusion that it was over, no matter what she did next. I forced myself to go home around 5 o'clock. She was, of course, in the kitchen, wearing a sundress, with perfect makeup and the smile of a love goddess. On a normal day, I would have hugged her immediately, but today I barely glanced at her. I went to the guest room to change. About 20 minutes later, she called out that dinner was ready. For the sake of my sons, I had to play a role, but I wanted Hannah to understand that this charade would change nothing. We sat down at the table. She poured us red wine and served steak with mushrooms, our traditional Saturday dinner. I barely paid her any attention, talking to the boys about things that didn't concern her. She tried to change the subject, but I kept steering the conversation away. The children didn't suspect anything, but she understood everything. After the meal, she casually suggested I help with the dishes and told the boys to go play. I was already furious, but when I saw her sitting calmly as if nothing had happened, my blood began to boil. From the next room came the sounds of the boys arguing over a video game, and then she said, "Mark, sit down. We need to talk." I dropped abruptly into a chair, crossing my arms, ready for an unpleasant conversation. "What now?" I muttered. She wasted no time on pleasantries and looked at me as if I were the one at fault. "Are you seriously asking that with that face?" she hissed. According to her, if I really didn't understand what was happening, then our marriage was in even worse shape than she thought. She declared that I considered her intention to get pregnant by another man to be a betrayal. I listened in silence, not letting her distort the facts. My voice was calm, but every word cut like a blade. "Do you think I will just sit and endure this? Do you think you can pull this off and act like everything is fine? You hide behind a good deed for your sister, but don't take me for a fool. You are planning an affair and looking for excuses." Her mask of a loving wife vanished instantly, her face becoming angry and unpleasant. "I am doing this for my sister," she spat with venom in her voice. "If you can't handle that, then leave. Divorce me." I did not flinch. She thought I was bluffing, but I was not playing. "If you are ready to destroy the family for your sister, that's your choice. But don't expect me to wait obediently." I spent the whole day at the office, thinking about our union. A marriage should be a mirror, but you throw stones into it, shattering it into pieces. No matter how hard we try to glue them back together, it is already ruined. I leaned over the table and whispered, "I am not joking. Do you want to destroy everything we built? Are you choosing them over me and the children? Then don't be surprised when nothing is left. This is a matter of respect and fidelity. You made your choice and are now trying to pass it off as a noble sacrifice." I stood up, feeling a heaviness in my chest. I didn't want to look at her anymore. I went to the boys' room and spent the whole evening playing Call of Duty with them. Only that helped drown out the noise of my collapsing life. I felt everything falling apart, and it was devastating me. With each passing day, I was losing something important. Weeks passed, but nothing changed. Hannah played the role of the perfect mother and wife, hoping that if she smiled often enough, I would forget her plans. Every time she brought up the baby, I shut her down. That was a line that could not be crossed. She asked me to trust her, but I no longer believed her, not one bit. One evening, Susan came for dinner. After the meal, Hannah asked me to talk with them. I knew exactly what was coming. Susan began to play on sympathy, acting like a saint. "Mark, my life will not be complete without a child. What Hannah is willing to do for me is the greatest gift. Can't you open your heart?" I glanced at Hannah. She avoided my eyes. I could smell a trap a mile away and was not going to fall into it. I am not that stupid. "Susan," I said in a steely voice, "there are many ways to have a child. Turning my wife into an adulteress is not one of them." Hannah grew nervous, realizing she was losing control of the situation. "Life may have been unfair to you, Susan, but I am serious. If you go through with this, our marriage is over. Are you willing to destroy another family for your own selfishness?" I paused, letting my words sink in. Then I asked, "What if Barclay doesn't succeed the first time? Will you keep doing this for months? With James, it took us 9 months. With Martin, 5. Do you think this will happen instantly? Hannah turned away, trying to hide her guilt, but I saw everything. And what if one child isn't enough? Will you decide you need a whole army? Susan's face reddened, and Hannah just picked at her nails, avoiding my gaze. I looked at her with disgust. So you have thought this all through. This is just despicable. You are exactly like your mother. I see that clearly now. I stood up, clenching my fists. Susan began to cry, and Hannah dropped the mask and got angry. Mark, I didn't think you were so stupid. We gave you a chance to act like a man, but you refused. Fine. On Friday, I am leaving to stay with Susan and Barclay for a week. Deal with your own problems yourself. I did not hesitate for a second. My voice came out sharply. Don't bother coming back on Friday. When you get there, you will be served divorce papers. Your things will be packed and placed in the garage. Over the past 3 weeks, I had met with Liam Strong 6 times. The prenuptial agreement protected my business and the trust fund. The house and land belonged to me before the marriage. The only thing we had to split was our joint savings and investments. That meant I would have to give her about $1.5 million. By that time, the investment account had already been split by me into 2 parts. In our state, divorce is possible without proving fault, but the law does take into account unreasonable behavior. The chat messages and the audio recording of that meeting became strong evidence confirming the inappropriateness of Hannah's actions. Furthermore, her hospitalizations during pregnancy practically guaranteed that custody of the boys would remain with me. Heading to my room, I sent Liam a short message. She's not backing down. They're starting this Friday. He called back almost immediately. After a quick greeting, Liam got down to business. Do you know their plan? I filled him in on the events. Hannah was planning to go to them on Friday, right after work, and stay there through the weekend and all of the following week. Good, Liam said. We need to serve her the notice on Friday, as soon as her shift ends. That will make her think twice and create the right impression with the judge. The court needs to see that she had every opportunity to back down, and the divorce petition, better than any words, confirms the seriousness of your intentions. The house was cold, like an icebox. A stifling atmosphere reigned in every room, and the tension in the air was literally suffocating. When the children fell asleep, I felt her staring at me, but I was not going to give in. She tried to get closer, pretending nothing was happening, but I shut down every attempt. My wife wanted to take my hand and press it to herself, playing the role of a tender wife, but I pulled away each time. Finally, she spoke in a soft, insinuating voice, hoping for my sympathy. Mark, it's only 1 week of our lives. Can that really change anything? I stood up abruptly, feeling rage and disgust boiling inside me. Hannah, this will change absolutely everything. You are leaving me for another man. I turned to her, my gaze icy. When you come back, you will already be an unfaithful wife. I will never be able to touch you again without thinking about what you did. Do you really think this is about 1 week? Are you that naive? If you cross their threshold tomorrow, our relationship is over. There will be no turning back. Her face fell, but she continued to look into my eyes, trying to convince me that our union could still be saved. I did not believe her. Mark, I am not leaving you for someone else. I am just carrying a child for my sister. My bitter laugh cut through the silence. Do you really not understand? You are leaving me. You are putting their whims and desires above my interests and the needs of our children. You are abandoning us for a week as if we mean nothing. You don't care what I have to tell the boys or how I will explain it to them. And what will happen when their friends find out? Rumors will spread instantly. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a threatening whisper. And don't think that if nothing happens this time, it will all stop. You will go back there next month, and the month after, and again, until you get pregnant. You won't be able to hide it. People will find out and start gossiping, and then you will have to explain how you turned our family life into this shameful circus. I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but I did not let up. You betrayed our family, me, just to fulfill your sister's dreams and your mother's crazy wishes. You have already chosen them. The decision is made. I leaned toward her, switching to a quiet but firm whisper. This is your last chance to understand what you are destroying right now. Do you want to continue on this path? Fine. But everything that happens from now on will be on your conscience. You will be the one who destroys our home and tears the family apart. I turned and walked away. At first she remained still, but soon she rushed after me. I went up the stairs without looking back and locked the bedroom door. A few seconds later there was a knock, first hesitant, then more insistent. "What do you mean? What are you planning?" Panic sounded in her voice. I opened the door just enough to look her straight in the eye. "I already warned you about the consequences. You need to decide what is more important, your family or your sister's selfish needs. Choose, because after this step, there is no going back. You will see what happens next, and it will be unpleasant." I slammed the door in her face, the sound echoing through the empty house. For me, it was over. For her, too. By 10 o'clock at night, I was already in bed. That was the first decent sleep since this nightmare began. I had done everything I could. Now the responsibility was on her. Whatever happened next was her choice. The next morning, I did not rush to work. There was no point. I stayed home, made breakfast for the boys, trying to maintain the appearance of a normal life, though my head was in turmoil. Then I heard her footsteps. Hannah came into the kitchen, dragging a suitcase behind her. She looked at me with feigned concern, expecting sympathy. Then she hid the suitcase in the laundry room, hoping I wouldn't notice. I didn't even look up from the stove. "I see you've made your decision." She walked over to the closet, shuffling through things, and suddenly froze. I heard her ragged breathing. "What do you mean, eat one last time? What are these strange phrases, Mark? What's going on?" My voice remained low and dead serious. "There is no mystery in my words. I have been completely honest with you. You just chose to ignore every warning I gave. Do you think you can deceive me? I understand perfectly well where this is heading, so don't try to treat me like a fool." She tried to make me feel guilty. "I can't just turn my back on Susan, Mark. She needs me. Her mental state depends on this act." I turned to her, gritting my teeth. "Oh, really? You know what, Hannah? Our family has been second in your life for a very long time. You made your choice, and it clearly isn't us. So don't pretend to be a martyr. You are not a victim. You were just selfish." Without waiting for an answer, I shouted toward the stairs. "Boys, breakfast is on the table." Grabbing my keys, I headed for the exit. She caught my hand at the door, desperation in her voice. "Aren't you even going to kiss me goodbye?" I pulled my hand away without looking at her. "No, I don't want to take anything from Barclay." My words were as cold as ice, and I made sure she felt it. As I left, I heard her crying, but I did not look back. I walked out and slammed the door loudly, cutting off the sound of her sobs. But the hardest thing was her anguished, hoarse voice coming from behind the barrier. "Mark, please, I need you to be there when I do this." All day, Hannah, Susan, and even Stephanie tried to call me, but I ignored the calls. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the secretary said John was on the line. "Put him through," I answered, and waited. "Hi, Mark. I understand this all seems like a spectacle, but the situation has turned into a real battle of wills. Hannah hoped you would give in, but you are fighting to the end. Now she is afraid that if she backs down, she will lose. How do we fix this?" I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, John, but there is nothing to fix. If I allow this to happen, I will lose respect for myself. I won't be able to look at myself in the mirror or ever touch Hannah again. She has cornered herself. If she had thought at all, she would have realized I would not tolerate this. Honestly, I think our marriage is destroyed. Your words that she doesn't want to back down only confirm that. I'm sorry, John, but either she comes home tonight or it's over." He asked, "Hannah claims you are divorcing her. Is that true?" "Yes, John. I warned her. If she continued on this path, I would file for divorce. The papers are already prepared. In our state, I can do this unilaterally, and she cannot stop me." John sighed heavily. "Will you abide by the terms of the prenuptial agreement?" "I'm glad you remember that," I answered. "Yes, I will. I intend to protect my business, and the house belonged to me before our union. I will be fair, but don't expect excessive generosity from me." There was a long pause. Then John said, "In your position, I would probably do the same. I warned Stephanie, asked her not to push it too far, but she was sure you would give in to preserve your status. I should have been firmer." We ended the call with brief words of thanks. I knew that future conversations with John or anyone else in the family would not be so calm. I decided to go home early. The boys were at the neighbors, Mrs. Neal's. I needed to get used to the new reality, because the children's lives were about to change completely. Soon, John called again. "Damn it, Mark. She was served the divorce papers today." That's right, John. I told you I would do it. Now she sees I am serious. The ball is in her court. Either me and the boys, or Susan and Barclay. For a moment there was silence. Then John said that Hannah was in shock. Stephanie was furious and wanted to destroy me, and Susan had fallen into such a deep depression that it was impossible to talk to her. You really have shaken our whole family, he added. I replied, I'm sorry, John, but you know what I've been through over the past 3 weeks. It's not my fault. I simply have no choice. Tell Hannah that her actions will be the final answer. If she comes home, we can talk. If not, I will know whose side she is on. I hung up without waiting for an answer. I drove home, picked up the children, and ordered pizza. If Hannah came back, the evening would be difficult. We had dinner, and as I was loading the dishwasher, I heard a car pull up. Looking out the window, I saw John, Stephanie, and Hannah. I told the boys to go to their rooms and play on their computers, and I headed to the bedroom. I hated that place now. Too much bad stuff had happened there recently. Stephanie stormed into the room like a hurricane. Her face was twisted with rage, and John followed behind, trying to hold her back. Stephanie, we came here to help, not to inflame the conflict, he said, grabbing her arm in an attempt to calm her. She roughly pushed him away and spun around. How could things get any worse, John? This idiot is stopping us from having grandchildren. I've had enough of this crap. He is destroying everything, and I will not tolerate it. I saw John's face tense. It was clear that even he was tired of her outbursts. He gave her such a look that she involuntarily stepped back half a step, but she kept talking. At that moment, Hannah walked in, dragging her feet like a condemned prisoner. She clutched a brown envelope in her hands, her eyes red and swollen from long crying. She sank onto the sofa, her head bowed low. I stayed where I was, in the only empty chair, and stared straight ahead. John sat Stephanie down at the kitchen table, muttering something about coffee, but I paid him no attention. My gaze was fixed on Hannah. Finally she looked up, her voice trembling. Is this your final word? I did not even move. Yes, it is. Her voice broke. Is there no room for compromise? I answered without a moment's hesitation. No, none. She paused for a moment before asking about IVF. Could we at least discuss that option? This question hit me like a blow to the gut, and I had to fight off a wave of nausea. Hannah, I told you about this 3 weeks ago, but you didn't want to listen to me, did you? You imagined you could do whatever you wanted behind my back and I would just accept it. Well, now it's too late. You can donate your eggs or hire a surrogate mother. I am even willing to pay for it, but you will not carry this child, not after the way you have treated me. I noticed Stephanie open her mouth again, but John put his hand on her shoulder and gave her that look. The one that clearly said, "Be quiet now, Stephanie. This is only about them. Let them sort it out." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, and I watched them roll down her cheeks. But I was no longer the bad guy here. She had taken care of that herself. I simply refused to be the one on whom all the blame was placed. Hannah wiped her face and looked at me with despair. "Mark, I don't want a divorce. I need you. What can I do to make this right?" I leaned back in my chair, exhaling heavily. "Honestly, Hannah, I don't know if this can be fixed. Too many bad things have happened. Too many lies and too much disrespect. But if you truly want to try, here is where we will start. You stop this whole thing with Susan. Your decision to exclude me from the discussion is non-negotiable. If you decide to be a surrogate for her, it is over between us. I will file for divorce without a second thought." Her face fell, but I continued. "Second, we will rebuild this marriage from scratch. You do not have the right to make such decisions and then expect forgiveness. I gave you personal space, and you took that as permission to do whatever nonsense you wanted. A wife who respects her husband does not suggest such a thing. A woman who understands the essence of marriage would not even think of it." I let those words hang in the air for her to absorb. We need to repair this broken mirror, but I am not even sure it can be fixed. At this, she flinched. Her voice trembled with fear. "You said before that a broken mirror can be glued back together, but the cracks will remain forever. Is that really how it will be? Will our marriage really become like that?" I looked at her without blinking. "Yes, I'm afraid that is exactly how it will be." By this point, Stephanie's patience had run out. Her face was contorted with rage, her voice full of venom. "What about Susan? You are robbing her of her only chance to have a child. How can you be so heartless?" Without taking my eyes off Hannah, I answered, "Hannah, you can donate your eggs at a clinic. They will be fertilized with Barclay's sperm and implanted into a surrogate mother. That service exists, but that's not all. Once your eggs are harvested, I expect you to have your fallopian tubes tied." I saw the blood drain from her face. She knew this was coming, but hearing it was another matter. She choked out through tears. "Please, Mark, don't make me do this." I shook my head in disgust. "You really don't understand anything, do you? You started playing games with your body, thinking you could just keep going. The only way for me to guarantee this won't happen again is to make sure you cannot get pregnant naturally. I've had enough of your antics. When you play with fire, you'd better be ready to get burned." She sobbed even harder, and I just looked at her, unmoved. I was not going to be her hero. She would not get off scot-free. Stephanie, still seething with anger, looked at me as if I were a monster. "You truly are heartless." I did not even flinch. I just turned to her and smirked. "I learned from the best, Stephanie." Hannah agreed to sterilization on the condition that I would stop the divorce proceedings. We agreed that I would pause the case, and once she had the procedure, I would withdraw it. A month later, we found ourselves at a reproductive medicine clinic. The specialists helped Susan and Barclay find a surrogate mother, and John and I each paid $10,000. The egg retrieval went without major complications for Hannah, just some mild pain. A week later, she underwent sterilization, and I asked the judge to withdraw the divorce petition, which was approved without issue. Life seemed to return to normal, but our former intimacy faded. In the evenings, we sat in different chairs, staring at the television, with absolutely nothing to talk about. About a month after the procedure, the surrogate mother had 2 viable eggs implanted, but in the 3rd month, she miscarried. After that, none of the remaining eggs were viable, and Hannah could not provide any more. She stopped organizing family gatherings, and I gladly avoided meeting other people. We became 2 people who raised children together and were bound only by a marriage certificate, without a real relationship. Everything I had predicted came true. Hannah had created a dead-end situation that ended exactly as I had foreseen. For 10 years, we did everything for the children: sports, school, activities. I was always there, and so was Hannah. Our relatives thought everything was wonderful, but at home, the atmosphere was different. Of course, we shared a bed, but there was no emotional closeness. Sex happened occasionally, 2 or 3 times a week, but there was no love in it. We made sure the other got what they wanted, but we always fell asleep facing away from each other. When Martin turned 16, he started his own app development business and began earning good money. At 20, a large company from San Jose offered him a 7-figure sum to buy his business and hired him with a 6-figure salary. He accepted the offer, and we drove to San Jose to look around. He rented a house in a gated community near the highway. James was 22 by then, newly married to his high school sweetheart. They worked as accountants for John and rented a small house. Since real estate prices were skyrocketing, they couldn't afford to buy a home. So I set up a trust fund to help them acquire their own house. Hannah and I were left alone in the empty nest, and it became obvious that neither of us wanted to talk. 2 weeks after James's wedding, Hannah asked me to come home early. I walked in and saw her in the kitchen with a suitcase. She was crying, but then she said, "Mark, we both knew this moment would come. 10 years ago, we stopped being husband and wife. Since then, we have only grown apart. It's time to admit that our marriage is broken. No matter how hard we try, the cracks are too big to ignore." She added, "I am filing for divorce, just like back then. My lawyer's information is in this envelope. Let's do this as simply as possible." I had to agree. We had lived like this for 10 years. She had her accounts, I had mine. All the property had essentially already been divided. This divorce had been a long time coming. You can't stop a train that has already picked up speed. I nodded. "I think that's for the best. Let me know who to contact and we'll get it done." Hannah stood up and kissed me on the cheek, the first sign of affection in a long time. She said, "I packed enough for a week. I'm going to rent an apartment in the same neighborhood as James. I'll let you know when I'm settled, and someone can come for the rest of my things." "Do you mind if I take some of the furniture?" she asked. "Of course not," I replied. "Just leave me a couple of chairs and a bed," she joked. "Most of it probably won't fit in my new place anyway." Then she said, "See you around, Mark," and left for the last time. I felt a slight sadness, but mostly relief. We had not been a couple for so long that this seemed like the logical end of the road. I called Liam, and he agreed to help with the divorce again. The judge wanted us to see a counselor, but we both decided it was pointless. In the end, he dissolved the marriage, and 90 days later, everything was finalized exactly as Hannah had wanted. Shortly before the divorce was final, James announced that they were expecting a baby, but he hardly came to see me. Then I made several important decisions. First, to sell the business. I put it on the market, and one of my main competitors offered me $30 million. I took the deal. The business was not worth that much to anyone except my competitor. After the sale, I gave the house to James and moved to a small town in the Napa Valley. It was so small that there wasn't a single mechanic, so I opened my own little shop. It was tiny, and I worked there as much as I wanted. Even better, Martin could work remotely most of the time, so he moved in with me. We set up an office for him in the basement, and I occasionally drove back to our hometown. James was still upset about the divorce, but he wanted me to be part of little Jane's life. I enjoyed visiting her. A couple of years after her birth, I ran into Hannah at our son's house. She was dating a doctor who was one of her clients. I was genuinely happy for her. Soon after that, I went to a networking event in my new town at the invitation of an accountant. There I met Ruby, a website designer in her 30s. The next evening, our group had a drinks party. As we were leaving, Ruby said, "I hope you come to the party." She gave me a sly smile. I smiled back and asked, "Is it fun or a waste of time?" She answered, "This time, I promise it will be fun." Ruby was 20 years younger, but that night I was completely charmed. We never got married, but after that, I never had any trouble finding company. Susan was devastated after the pregnancy loss. She started therapy, quit her job, and went back to school to become a special education teacher. After graduating, she took a position in a classroom for children with developmental disabilities and found true meaning there. Her depression lifted, and she began to think that not having children was the best thing that had ever happened to her. Barclay, on the other hand, turned into an old fool. Susan caught him trying to impregnate a surrogate mother the old-fashioned way, and he succeeded. He married her, and they had 3 children. However, during the divorce, he discovered that she had been cheating on him. It turned out that only the first child was his, the other 2 were not. Since he was listed on the birth certificates and the biological fathers could not be found, the alimony payments continued. Now he lives in a run-down part of the city, working mainly for clients from the same environment. His ex-wife has turned the children against him, and he no longer sees them. I'll bet he bitterly regrets ever having children.